We have a very special speaker today, astronaut Mike McCulley. Mike McCulley is one of the dearest friends of the American Space Museum. And if you know Mike, he's just a pretty normal guy that he always tells me he's the luckiest guy in the world. He got the job he wanted, and he got the girl he wanted. You said that a few times. He's raised in Livingston, Tennessee. He does a lot of good in that town north of Nashville area. He's a Purdue graduate in the Navy, and our first astronaut who's a submariner up there. His flight was STS-34. It launched Magellan to the Jupiter to do a lot of amazing things. I think in 1989, I'm an amateur astronomer and actually thought I would talk to Jupiter about him, but then I realized he's a pilot. He just got him there and back. A great guy. He resigned from the astronaut corps, he said, because he had 6 other pilots in his class that needed to fly. So he, with Mr. Adamson over here and Bruce Melnick, formed the United Space Alliance. And I'm told on the back of a napkin and adult beverages were involved. But without further ado, I want to introduce Mike McCulley to you all with our message today here on this Memorial Day.
It's been a long time we've been doing this, and doing an interview with the Florida Today guy who went some real box. Twice in that short conversation I choked up. It wasn't choking up for 30 seconds. Louder? Okay. He mentioned that I'm the luckiest man alive, and actually it starts with her, Jane Emily. A round of applause for my... She's put up with more and endured more. When I was working, I was pretty focused. Also need to give another round of applause to Jay Honeycutt. He's the guy that sitting in a restaurant in Merritt Island one night said to me, and I was down here as still an astronaut, and he said to me, "Are you ready to get a real job?" And I was taken aback. "What? I have a real job." He said, "Well," and he'd been down here for maybe a year or so, and he was saying that we could become good friends. And long story, after that restaurant night, I went back to the NASCAR office and I asked Dan Bravenstein, who was the chief at that time, I said, "Well, I've got a pretty good offer and I'd like to know when I'm going to fly again." And the answer was a bad answer. There was a long time in front of me, and it was going to be flying as a pilot again instead of a commander. Made the decision easy. It also didn't hurt that Jane Emmons, a Brevard County native, grew up in Melbourne. And in fact, I have another note to myself in here someplace where her dad worked with Kim and I as a photographer, technical photographer, when she was growing up. And she remembers him disappearing to parts unknown up and down the range at that time, because of work satellites. And so we have pretty deep roots in Brevard County and the Space Center. And so when Jake gave me the offer to come down and go to work for the shuttle processing team, and I went back and I was waiting a long time, and I was 40 years old at the time. Well, it's time. It's time. And so we moved down here and we never looked back. And we loved and still continue to love what we do and where we live. And when I got the phone call from Mark about Andy Allen's a good friend of ours, and he was actually supposed to do this today. And he's a better speaker than I am, but I'm older and he was sick, and I'm still healthy, and so here I am. You got I have notes to myself someplace, but I have no idea where they are. Well, I've read it a couple of times. So here we go. I started thinking over the last period of time when I knew I was going to come up here about disasters that happen in your life and what you do with them and how you deal with them and what you do when the disaster is over. And I found myself going back to 1953, and I was 9 years old, and my daddy was an aerospace worker out in San Diego, and riding a bike to the zoo in San Diego. And then one day he's dead. A drunk driver got him. And my mama, who never wasted time on anything, found herself sitting there with 2 kids, and she didn't have a dime, completely penniless. And so the next thing I know, I'm standing on the tarmac in Nashville, Tennessee in January, freezing my butt off. And my sister was crying, and I was scared. I was surrounded by about 100 people, all relatives in one form or another, and I didn't know a damn one of them. And they're patting you on the head. When you're 9 years old, all you want to do is go hide someplace. But it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened. So a disaster turned into a really positive thing for us because Mama was able to, we moved into a 2-bedroom house that my grandmother owned, and for a long time my mother, my sister, and I were in the same bed at that point. And then the uncles came along and decided they had to do something with me because that wasn't right. And I don't mean to make this about me as much as I want it to be about bad stuff happens. Really bad stuff happens. And what you do is you figure out what you got to do, and then get on with it, do the memorials, do this kind of thing, so that nobody forgets what happened and who it happened to and what effect it had. And so when I started thinking about those, the first place I went was 1953. And I apologize if it's a little too much about me, but it set me for how I lasted. So the next time, and this is outside the space program too, the next time I ran into that thing, I just graduated from submarine school in New London, Connecticut. And a few months later, a bunch of my classmates from that submarine school class were on the USS Thresher, which came out of the yards in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, promptly went to the bottom. And it was a huge sort of impact to the submarine force and for the young folks in the submarine force. But it was yet the second time that I'd run into this disaster and then, long story short, I was doing the Columbia thing at Arlington Cemetery. We were walking back to the parking lot, and we come around this little curve, and there's a little hillside there, and I glance over there, and everybody who died on Thresher was on that hillside, small things. And I remember stopping, and I get over there, and it'd been a bunch of years, and I cried. This is what I do with Fox and too. I mean, after all these years, it's still a very, very emotional period of time when they were buried in spirit. So anyway, that was Thresher. And that was the second natural, not natural, but disaster in my career. I was I think I was probably an E4 at the time. And I was heading to the USS Daniel Webster and did that. And so we went along for a while, and then the Navy selected me to go to Purdue. And 2 of the first people I ran into in the first year or so there were the first guy and the last guy on the moon. And they became my mentors. It was really awesome. I remember one night when I was down here, and it was a launch countdown, and we took a break for something, and we were standing there by the elevator. I was fairly new down here from the astronaut program. A lot of the old guys down here weren't sure what the hell I was going to do when I got down here. But I'm standing there with these guys, the elevator door opens, Neil's standing there. Mike, big hug, glad you're doing. And so my place was sick. You want to touch me? Again, I don't mean to make this all about me, but it's how, not me, but many of us dealt with the disasters that we're celebrating today, which was the Apollo guys, the Challenger folks, and the Columbia folks. And you know, it was very similar between those two and how long it took us to get back. 1,000, 10,000 or so changes we made, and we're not sure if we're going to ever fly again or not. And it was such, and for guys, some of them like me, when Challenger went down, I hadn't flown yet. I'd been assigned to a crew. Then we stood around looking at each other one day and said, well, we gave up our careers and whatever we were doing before to come down here, and the probability right now is that we're never going to fly. It was that kind of an environment. And then like NASA does, as good as anybody I've ever seen in the world, you shake it off. You set up honorariums, you set up honors, you set up ways to address what happened, pay homage to the people that happened to, particularly the astronauts who died, and then you get on with it. You just get on with it. And I mean, that's what Mama taught me to do in 1953. And I mean, it was the whole same thing, 6 or 7 times. And there was, the other thing was the Apollo flyer, and they went through that same sort of stuff. Wring your hands, cry loudly, wondered what Congress is going to do to you. And then finally you start putting stuff back together, and you go fly, and you go to the moon. You do everything. It's like John Kennedy said in his speech that when he was saying we're going to go to the moon. We do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And this stuff is hard. You know, it's not like losing 17 people in the schoolyard's bad example, but you got to do it if you believe in what you're doing, and this crowd does, and we all did at that time, and those that didn't left, and some left after those disasters, went on to do other things, but not the core. So bad stuff happens. We wring our hands and we work and we cry and we do all those emotional things, and then at some point you shake it off. You have the memorials, you have the services, and you go to work. And you go to work and you go to work, and it's amazing to me that we knew what happened to shuttles, and yet 10,000 fixes later we thought we'd go fly because we got out of control on things we were going to change and make better. But we did. And when I say we, I'd say this whole team, and the whole team that was around then. It's not the astronauts. In fact, I was overwhelmed by it. I fell in love with KSC and the workforce at KSC and what they did. So when it looked like it was going to be another 6 years before I flew, after I flew first, I'm not doing this. I'm going to Florida. And I never, ever regretted it. The best 17 years of my life was Lockheed, USA, KSC. It was just awesome, all the things we were able to do. And that's where Lineback and I met each other. Bob Seek and I was my hero. And it was just awesome. And it's because the people in this world deal with disaster, shake it off, fix it, and get on with life. And that's what we've been doing for all those years. And I am immensely proud to have been a part of that, to work with guys like Jim Tully and Terry. It's just been, and Marty, it's just been awesome for me to be part of this whole team during all of that time. But like I said, you get over it, you work some more, you work even some more, you run through the frustrations, then you come back, and in the case of the shuttle and Apollo, you came back in spades. We went to the moon 6 times. Apollo 13 happened. That was handled by professionals in a very, very professional way. Those guys saved lives. We did all the things and I listened to the news yesterday. It was 50 years ago, the last time we walked on the moon. And Gene Cernan and Neil Armstrong turned out to be my really strong mentors over the years. And I was so proud, in addition to that thing from the elevator, where he sealed my face. KSC, about a connected guy. But it was just awesome. And when I got the call the other day, my friend Andy was sick, and so I got the chance to come up here and do this again and say thank you to all of you. I've just been blessed, very, very blessed to be part of this team. Jane is a Melbourne girl. People ask me sometimes how I got there, and I talk about the luckiest things in my life. And number one is her. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Her dad, well, I already told you that. Didn't have notes, so now I'm off track, and I'm just ad-libbing, so it's time to quit. God bless all of you. God bless this stage.
Thank you very much, sir. Some nice words there. I did mention that you were the COO and president and well-beloved leader of that United Space Alliance. It was the contractor to all the last decade there.